So this has been a big day of broadcasting, the third episode of the day, and I am so pleased to have Larry Klayman with me. Larry, how are you?
Jason, very well. And yourself?
I'm doing great. This is our first Skype interview, and of course we're going to be joined by Laura Loomer. I really apologize to everyone. I had sent an incorrect instruction to Laura, so yeah, I sent her the totally wrong message. My bad. I apologize to Laura and you, Larry, but there's so much to talk about today. While we're getting ready to get into that, I do want to remind people that they can follow Larry on Twitter at Larry E. Klayman. And Larry, of course, is the founder of Freedom Watch. He's the founder of Judicial Watch. Larry is a champion of justice. He was working with the Bundys, of course. You are the first lawyer to get, what was it against the president that you got, Larry?
Judge to rule that President Bill Clinton had committed a crime.
What was the crime?
And the last.
What was that crime?
What was the underlying crime? He released the Privacy Act protected file of a woman he harassed in the Oval Office, Kathleen Willey.
Oh, yes.
Of the Privacy Act.
Boy, it seems like a grain of sand in the desert of criminality that is the Clinton presidency, and now the ongoing crimes in the Clinton Foundation and the related entities that Charles Ortel has detailed so extensively. Now, Larry, there was some very disappointing news that came down just hours before we started this broadcast. This was initially going to be about your months-long now bid to become the new special counsel. What happened today?
Well, it's not surprising, Jason. If it happens, it's going to happen from the top. It's going to happen from President Trump. Because as I've said all along, and people can go to our website at freedomwatchusa.org, freedomwatchusa.org, sign the petition, donate to the cause, is that Jeff Sessions was never going to appoint a special counsel. I just wrote an article the other day talking about how he should be fired, how he should otherwise have to resign, because he's been under investigation himself. We now know by Andrew McCabe at the FBI for alleged perjury when he had his confirmation hearing in front of the U.S. Senate Judiciary Committee. And he's been under investigation by Mueller for alleged Russian collusion and obstruction of justice in the firing of Comey, along with the president. Now, of course, none of those things are really serious in reality, but he's put his head in the sand because he's scared about pushback from Mueller and the Democrats. He wants to look like he's independent. He wants to continue on as holier than thou above everything that's going on, and he's even defined his own political party. This guy is an absolute disgrace. The column I wrote at WorldNet Daily last Friday was Jeff Sessions, a national disgrace. You can see it at freedomwatchusa.org. So we need 100,000 signatures to have President Trump step in and fire Sessions immediately and then appoint me special counsel.
Yeah, I agree with that. And we're showing everybody the freedomwatchusa.org webpage right now as Laura joins us from Florida. Laura, can you hear me? Can you hear me all right? Laura, have you got us? Can you hear me? I so apologize, Laura. It's completely my fault for sending you the wrong start time. It's been a very busy day. Can you hear me, Laura? Have you got me?
We see her.
We see Laura. Can Laura? Yes, we hear you, Laura. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing great. You've had a hell of a day, Laura. I've got Larry with us, and tell us what happened. You're down there in Florida. You're covering the trial of, is it Omar Mateen? What's going on? Can you hear me? Laura?
Yeah, your audio keeps going in and out. Well, basically, this morning I went back to the courthouse, the federal courthouse in Orlando, because yesterday, I was at the courthouse all day yesterday. I was listening to closing arguments in the North Solomon trial because I was given press credentials. I'm a member of the media, and I was given press credentials by the courthouse to cover this trial. And when I returned today, everything was fine. I went through security, and I was in the press room, and I was just sitting there with all the other reporters on my laptop, on my cell phone. And then all of a sudden, about 15 minutes or so down, the U.S. Marshal opens the door, and everyone's silent. And he says, "Oh, Miss Loomer, I need you to put all your stuff away and come with me immediately." And then I leave the room, and I take my stuff, and I said, "What is the problem?" And he said, "I've been ordered by the judge to escort you out of the court and take away your press credentials and ban you from covering the rest of this trial. You are not allowed to come back into this courthouse, and you are no longer," he literally said this phrase, "you are no longer a member of the media by court order."
What?
And I was thinking to myself, what does that even mean? Like, what does it mean that I'm not a member of the media anymore? Of course I'm a member of the media. So I'm sitting there, all right, what should I do in this moment? Because obviously, like, this is a serious situation because there were police officers nearby, like security guards, and then other employees of the courthouse who were there overseeing this. And I thought, all right, I'm going to tell him that I'm going to put my phone on and I'm going to record him and say, "Officer, for my own legal protection, I'm going to record this, and I'm going to need you to tell me why I'm being banned and why you're taking my press credentials away." And I was in the area where you're allowed to use your cell phone. And when I did that, he forcefully grabbed my hand and he took my cell phone, like very, very aggressively. And he said, "You won't be doing that." And then he made me leave and go down the elevator, or the elevator with several other people. And I kept asking him, "Is this because of my politics? Is it because I'm conservative? Is it because I've published like critical or articles that are critical of Islam? Is this because I confronted family members yesterday? Why am I being banned? Please tell me." You know, like, this is a violation of my First Amendment right.
Absolutely.
And he wouldn't tell me. And so then I left, and I was confused. And all the reporters just started putting their cameras on me as if they knew something was going to happen. And it was actually really strange to me because this morning when I went to the courthouse, the reporters were filming me. And I kept thinking to myself, why are all these reporters pointing their cameras on me as I walk into the courthouse? I thought maybe they thought I was somebody else. And now I know why. I mean, this seems like a coordinated hit on me by the judge and the family representatives and these liberal members of the press who were bothered by my questions yesterday.
Wow. That's crazy. Larry, what do you think about this? Do they have any kind of justification for doing what Laura just described?
No, in fact, I'm representing Laura in this matter. It's not over yet. Laura can continue with her story, but she's very brave, and she stood her ground, not in the way that we talk about in Florida sometimes with Klayman Martin, but she stood her ground in an appropriate way. And, she's a hero in this. And let me tell you what the problem here is. You've got a judge, and this is symptomatic of the federal judiciary these days, which is highly political, which gets their robes, in effect, by sucking up to politicians. This judge apparently was appointed by Barack Obama. Obama was very pro-Muslim. Obama is half Muslim, for that matter. And he is scratching the back of the powers to be that got him his job, and therefore Laura becomes the whipping boy. He has no right to keep her out of the courthouse. Apparently the question that she asked was asked outside of the family member. It wasn't asked in the courthouse. She didn't do any videoing in the courthouse other than this incident. And we're going to address this issue because it is symptomatic of what's been going on with the federal judiciary these days. They're worse, frankly, the federal judiciary, than even the Council for American Islamic Relations, because they further this kind of conduct, not just with regard to radical Muslims, but they're furthering it with regard to these radical leftist groups that are trying to destroy this country. This is just one part of it.
Yeah, and it gets even scarier because after I left, when I demanded a reason, I said, "You need to tell me why I'm being banned. You need to give me a piece of paper." I said, "Give me a piece of paper and I'll leave." And they wouldn't. So then I thought about it and I thought, wow, they're trying to ban me without any reason. And they're not even issuing me any type of documentation. So I decided to go back into the courthouse, even though they said I was banned. And I said, "I am not leaving this courthouse until you give me a written statement as to why I have been banned by this judge." And I said, if you are not okay with that, then you can arrest me. But this is my First Amendment right, and you need to tell me why I've been banned. You can't just kick journalists out because you don't like their politics.
And then
Tell
what
him
happened?
Yeah,
And
tell him what happened after that.
then what happened was they said, okay, ma'am, go outside. And they took me outside, and one of the marshals met with me and said, wait here for 2 minutes, and I'll be back with some type of paper or, somebody who will explain something. I waited for 20 minutes. All right. And this is like 90-degree weather. It's very hot outside. It's very humid. I have no water. And I said, all right, this is ridiculous. I'm going inside. So I went inside again. And then at that point in time, they made me sit down. And I said, I want to speak to somebody right now. You make me wait outside. You're ignoring me. You're being extremely disrespectful, and I deserve to know why I've been banned. So then they still wouldn't talk to me. And at that point in time, like they were ignoring me. They were literally ignoring me. And so it got to a point where they ended up putting me in this little side area where they detained me. I was not handcuffed, but they took my cell phone from me. They confiscated my electronics. They confiscated my bag, and they took my ID. And they gave me a citation for not listening to police orders. And then I was interrogated by an officer from the Department of Homeland Security.
Wow.
And I had to in the lobby as all these other people were walking by. I was treated like a criminal for simply asking them for a document. And they literally cited me for disobeying police orders when really all I was asking them for was a piece of paper explaining why I was banned. So then after the fact, they said that they talked to the judge after they interrogated me, and the judge said, oh, I'm ordering you to confiscate her cell phone.
What is this judge's name, Laura?
Judge Byron, I believe. Judge Byron. I believe it's Paul Byron.
Paul Byron. This is disgraceful behavior from Paul Byron. I have to say, sorry, Laura?
I believe it's Paul Byron.
I'm looking him up.
I kept on saying, I need this judge to give me a piece of paper, something that explains what's going on. You can't also just confiscate somebody's cell phone, especially a journalist's cell phone, without a warrant.
Right.
And they were trying to look at my text messages and see who was calling me. They were asking me who these people were, and they were like, "Oh, we need to see your pictures." Like they made me open my phone and show them my pictures, and then my phone was on 1%, and I was getting really anxious because I didn't know what they were going to do. And they kept on asking me for different addresses where I live and where my family lives, and just really being extremely invasive. And just it's a complete example of judicial overreach, right? And Larry's
Absolutely.
The expert, and I'm not, so I'm not going to pretend like I'm a lawyer. But I know my rights as a journalist, and my rights were violated today.
No,
it's really
terrible,
shocking.
Terrible. And here's the problem, Jason, is that we're going to go in and we're going to defend Laura with this bogus, completely frivolous citation. Okay, but this judge needs to be held accountable. He needs to be held accountable not only by his peers. When a judge does something that's unethical, your redress generally is to ask a judicial council in that district. That's the 11th Circuit. To take action. But the fact is that these judges eat lunch with the same judges that will be reviewing them in the 11th Circuit. And they cover it up for each other. And then if you go to the Judiciary Committee, they don't take any action. The last person who's been impeached, the last judge, is Alice Hastings in Miami for taking bribes. And then after he was impeached, he ran for Congress and won. He's still in Congress.
Wow.
There's no accountability for judges. And that's why I started Judicial Watch back in 1994. It's gotten much worse. They're out of control, particularly federal judges. And there are a few good ones. In my entire 40-year career, I can tell you maybe I've met 5, but the rest of them have been political hacks in these kinds of cases. And, Laura has a very strong case here. We might even consider, with her consent, suing this judge for violating her constitutional rights under a Bivens action. They're not immune.
I would love to see that happen.
Also extremely my reputation as a journalist. Right? Because when this happens, people, they say, you're not a real journalist, you're just an activist, or you're a criminal or you're harassing these people. And so now they've created this narrative throughout the Florida media that I was harassing the family of Noor Solomon, when I simply asked them a question. I said, is jihad Islamic terrorism? Because they're claiming that they're moderates and that Noor Solomon isn't of the same ideology as her ISIS husband. And so I asked them the question that you would ask anybody who, you would easily be able to tell if somebody was sympathetic to, radicalized Islam or radicalized Muslims. If you ask them if jihad is Islamic terrorism and they refuse to answer, or they say no.
What's ironic, and we all know this, is that there wouldn't be this degree of, quote, sensitivity by a federal judge if the defendant was Jewish or Christian. No way. It wouldn't happen. Muslims in this country today, they complain. They've got the Council for American Islamic Relations, which is a terrorist front organization, in my opinion, and they can take that and shove it. And the reality is that they get more rights than the rest of us. It's unbelievable. All they have to allege is racism or this or that, and judges like this guy down in Orlando just bend over for it, and it's an absolute disgrace.
It really is. It's a shocking situation. You know, I can remember quite clearly, Larry, when I was a young kid and Ronald Reagan was the president, he would go on the television and talk about how the Soviet Union was the evil empire. And even more recently, we heard George W. Stupid Bush talk about how North Korea and Iran, and there's this axis of evil, and they're oppressing human rights. But here we have Laura, who's a young woman who is just trying to exercise her First Amendment right, freedom of the press, freedom of speech. The question is legitimate. If jihad is terrorism. And they refuse to answer it, and now they've targeted Laura and they're smearing her. It's not
just this Obama-appointed judge, Jason and Laura. U.S. Marshal Service. Who does the U.S. Marshal Service work under? The Department of Justice. Who's the Attorney General? Jeff Sessions. Where's he in this? He just abdicated his responsibility to appoint a special counsel. He should be fired forthwith by Trump. I predict this will happen in the next few days. But the Justice Department is out of control. It does not defend people that deserve to be defended. It puts their head in the sand and instead does things like, phony fusion GPS steal dossiers to wiretap the president and everybody around him. There is no justice at the Justice Department, my alma mater, anymore.
We're really in a desperate situation, Larry. We've got to take these situations, things are out of control. The Constitution has basically been shredded. Police can grab and abuse a young woman. Laura has now faced ridicule and abuse by police departments in Las Vegas, police department here in Orlando. This is outrageous. What is it that they think they're trying to do?
Well, they're suppressing dissent. This is what happened with Bundy. If you rise up and challenge them in any way, you're going to be subject to surveillance by the FBI, the NSA, the CIA. I have lawsuits that are still pending on that, and we can talk about that a little later. Or you're going to be subject to what happened to Laura, or the worst case scenario, the Bundys. They wanted to put them away for life because they stood up to these goons that the BLM sent in at the request of Harry Reid when he put his own hand-picked head in there, Neil Corns. And this is the world we live in today. If you challenge the establishment, if you challenge the ruling elite in Washington, D.C., around the country, you can expect to be destroyed. And that's why we have to stand up to it. We do it legally. But I'll tell you something, if it doesn't happen legally, and I'm not advocating this, we're going to have a revolution shortly. It's going to happen soon. Yeah. Because people can't be treated this way. It's not just Laura, it's a lot of people around this country.
Now, Larry, I've heard that Ryan Bundy is running for political office in Nevada. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, I'm glad that he is. I take his hat off to Ryan in my personal capacity, not as head of Freedom Watch. I endorse him, and I will do everything I can to try to get him elected. But he's win or lose, he is now bringing the issue of who owns the land in Nevada front and center.
Yes.
And it's not just Nevada, it's Utah, it's Arizona, it's California, it's other western states where the federal government claims to own the majority of the land, and it doesn't constitutionally. And that's how we got into a situation like Bundy. And this is part and parcel to the tyranny and the power of the federal government that we see in the modern sense today going on which is even worse, I think, than what went on under King George III, which caused our first revolution.
Right. Now, Larry, I've got the Freedom Watch page up here, and of course people can go there, freedomwatchusa.org. There's a donate button. I know you do a lot of legal work pro bono. When people donate to Freedom Watch, are those funds used to do things like defend Laura in a case like this? I mean, I know Laura's struggling as a journalist like I am, and we don't have a lot of money to pay for legal defense. And I think that the police departments and judges know this and try to use it as a lever against someone like Laura.
Yes, that would go to defend Laura and other people like Laura. You know, we represent an African-American policeman in Dallas who was assaulted when Louis Farrakhan's guy killed 7 people down there. That case is going on. We represent a woman up in Northern California, Kiara Robles, who was attacked by Antifa at that speech that Milo from Breitbart was supposed to be able to give. Instead, she was maced and pepper sprayed and scared. These are the kinds of things that we need the donations for, to defend people like Laura. And by defending Laura, you're defending yourself, because today it's Laura, tomorrow it will be you.
That's absolutely right. And you know, Laura, I think you are absolutely fantastic. You're doing a great job in your journalism. You're a super nice person. You've become a great friend of mine, and I have tremendous respect for your courage, your integrity, and your tenacity. But you are a fairly petite woman of 24 years of age, and I imagine the police officer that accosted you was physically intimidating, no?
No, he was. And then they cornered me into the side of the wall, basically. And I just couldn't believe this guy, who was very stocky. I mean, he was probably like 250 pounds. He was a big guy. And I'm, like you said, I'm kind of small. And when he grabbed my hand and took my phone away from me, I was just shocked that he felt the need to be so aggressive. He could have just asked me, right? He could have said, "Ma'am, please do not use your phone." He didn't need to, you know, essentially assault me, which is what he did.
I agree.
You know, we saw that attitude in the Bundy case too. I remember the first time I walked into the courtroom, U.S. Marshals were there. They were extremely aggressive with me and people that were there. They think that they're above the law. They're not above the law. They're good U.S. Marshals, but they get carried away. And of course, we later found out what the FBI and BLM were doing. It had a kill list on the Bundys and everything else. And you know, we all respect, all three of us, federal law enforcement, but not federal law enforcement like this, who's taking orders from a hack, politicized judge who, frankly, would rather support radical Muslims than Christians and Jews in this country, to be blunt.
Well, or the Constitution is what I would like to have the judges supporting, to tell you the truth. It's a pretty shocking situation all around. Now, I had that judge, I had his page up just a moment ago. Laura, remind me of, oh, here it is. This is the Honorable Paul G. Byron, and I use that term loosely. I don't find his actions today to be very honorable. Now, Larry, the publicly available webpage here has the judge's chamber's email. Is that something that people should send a note to about this matter, or should they not do that?
Well, I can't tell them to do that. But they obviously have their own free will, Jason.
So I'm certainly not encouraging anyone to email this judge about what is quite obviously a violation of Laura's First Amendment rights. But, you know, anybody...
Laura tells me only the Huffington Post and one other leftist rag has written about this so far. We need to get this information out far and wide, and you're, of course, the vehicle, Jason, and we thank you for that. But we need conservative publications to write about it. The Washington Times, World Net Daily, Newsmax, others. I'm going to write something about it tomorrow in my column. We need to get it out.
And it's crazy because Huffington Post, they're so unethical. They said, "Oh, Loomer couldn't be, like, she declined to respond for comment." It's like, first of all, when they reached out to me, I was being detained by an officer from Department of Homeland Security and having my cell phone searched and confiscated. So for them to have the audacity to say something like that when they didn't even report the fact that I was being unconstitutionally questioned and searched, I mean, it's just so unethical, right? And And we really need to create more of an alliance among conservatives, just like Larry was saying, because, what happened to me could be you tomorrow, right? It could be your sister, it could be your brother, it could be your friend. And if you don't stand up for me and other people who are experiencing this, well, who's going to stand up for you?
Well, and this gets back, if I may promote my being special counsel, it gets back to how we started this show before Laura came on, and that is that Jeff Sessions, the Attorney General, our so-called Attorney General, has said he's not appointing a special counsel. That sends a message to the elites in this country, the establishment elites, Democrat and Republican and otherwise, that they can get away with whatever high crime and misdemeanor they want to because they're part of the club.
Right.
And consequently, it's people like Laura that get beaten up, so they can get their scalp. And I've, of course, been subject to that kind of treatment too. We all have. And, we have to put our foot down. We have to strike back. And that's why I need to be appointed special counsel. It's why President Trump needs to wake up. I really admire him. I think he's going to be a great president and already is. But he's taking advice from his lawyers. He's getting dragged along. And at this point, he should fire Sessions and order the next Attorney General to appoint me as special counsel. And you go to our website, if I may promote myself, at freedomwatchusa.org. Sign that petition because I do send him that petition, and make a comment on why you think I should be special counsel, because frankly, I'm the only one that will get the job done. If I'm special counsel, Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, George Soros, John Brennan, former CIA director, Clapper, former DIA director of national intelligence, all the rest of these criminals will be held accountable. And it's about time that someone is holding them accountable, because it's not happened up to this time.
Right.
I support that.
Yes, and right now I'm showing freedomwatchusa.org. Everyone can see right there on the main home page, we've got Klayman versus Mueller and a call to action to sign this petition. I agree. We really do need a man of action or a woman of action, but you've got my vote, certainly, Larry, so we need a man of action to be the special counsel and really do something. I mean, Sessions, I'm sorry, the man is just doing nothing. He's really a disgrace.
And I'm a supporter of Donald Trump's as well. And if you recall, I was once, like I said, arrested in New York City for protests at play in which they were advocating the assassination of Trump. And Donald Trump needs to do more as president to speak out against the constitutional violations against his own supporters, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, there is sweeping violations and total disregard for the constitutional rights of conservatives in this country as a way to get payback against President Trump and payback against Republicans. And we're the victims, right? It's not Donald Trump. He has the money to defend himself. He has people who will fight for him. It's his supporters who are, being detained unwillingly, being searched unwillingly, being assaulted like that girl in California at Milo's event, right? People like who are now facing the backlash. So he should do more to defend us.
And these are the real heroes. I mean, the poor guy's got so many problems. Everybody's coming after him, but someone needs to shake him and wake him up. Because his lawyers right now, Jay Sekulow, is a very good religious rights lawyer. He's not a criminal defense lawyer. He picked him off of Fox News, but that's not sufficient to defend the president of the United States. Ty Cobb, a Democrat, his other lawyer that's left, represented John Wang, the communist Chinese spy during the Chinagate scandal, which I trigger at Judicial Watch. These are the people that are in around the president. Now, Sekulow is loyal, but Cobb would probably like to stab the president in the back. And in fact, he's doing it through his bad advice. And he just needs to go for the fences right now. He needs to, hit a home run here and just clean house at the Justice Department. Sessions should go. The Deputy Attorney General Rosenstein, an Obama holdover, former U.S. attorney from Maryland, who actually participated in the illegality of the Steele dossier and the illegal FISA warrants that gave rise to wiretapping the Trump campaign and the president himself in all likelihood. These people need to be fired. And don't worry about what the left thinks. We're in a revolution. We're in a war. The hell with them. The hell with them.
And that activity, of course, also led to the ouster of General Michael Flynn, an honorable man who would have been doing a great job as the National Security Advisor. I wanted to bring you guys' attention to another travesty of justice that's been happening earlier today. Dr. Corsi, good friend of this program, has been on a Twitter storm about the basically harassment of Ted Malloch at an airport where he basically was detained. This was brought to my attention by Charles Ortel. Basically, someone, I don't know the full details of this story, but Mr. Malloch was basically grabbed by a bunch of FBI guys at the behest of Robert Mueller. And basically, Dr. Corsi has a number of tweets about this. People should be following him at Jerome_Corsi, and I believe he's been on InfoWars discussing this already. But it's a real shock. I mean, again, I come back to the rhetoric of Ronald Reagan and all of the things that we hear about, you know, political dissidents in places like China and North Korea, how journalists are jailed in Syria and places like this. I don't expect this to happen to Laura Loomer in Orlando, Florida. Judge Paul, whatever your name is, you are a disgrace, sir. What's that guy's name?
Byron.
Byron, yeah, not Lord Byron for sure. But, you know, years ago, I represented 25 Cuban journalists that were being persecuted by Castro. I went all the way to Brussels, Belgium, filed a criminal complaint against them in Belgium in those days. You could bring a criminal complaint as a private citizen, since you have international jurisdiction for crimes against humanity. And, you know, this is exactly the kind of thing that Castro did, and that Stalin did, and that Hitler did. And, you know, unless you're in line with them, unless you're MSNBC or you're CNN and you're furthering their agenda, Huffington Post, you know, this is what you get these days from the media. And you get this from certain judges on the federal bench in particular. There are so many federal judges, Jason and Laura. It disgusts me as a lawyer who believes in our legal system. And I speak out. I don't know of any lawyer that will speak out like I do, because they're worried about retribution.
Yeah.
Right.
And those judges will.
These people are people too. I mean, as you can see, I obviously am having a hard time speaking because I think I've come down with some type of throat infection because I've just been traveling between like cold and warm climates for a while now. And they kept asking me questions and I was coughing and it's hard for me to talk. They didn't offer me any water. And it's just like, these people are just so disgraceful, right? Just in their actions all around. And
Absolutely.
I really, really believe that, you know, it takes a really evil person to not only just totally violate somebody's rights like that to make a political example out of them, but to also, you know, just put them through what they did to me today.
Yeah, and what you've got here, Jason, you know, and I don't want to hog all the airtime here, but you've got here three branches of government, okay? You've got Congress that runs around making a lot of noise, holds hearings. They get on Fox News if you're conservative, CNN, MSNBC if you're not. They get reelected. They use that to raise money, but nothing ever happens. Then you've got the executive branch, where you have this deep state that's trying to destroy the president of the United States. Really, frankly, our last hope as a president, because if Trump fails, what we have next is much worse than Obama, than even Clinton, I'm sure. Yeah. And then you've got a judiciary that rubber stamps the illegal, political, and prejudicial acts of the other two branches of government, by and large. There are very few judges, I don't know of more than one currently, that will stand up for someone like Laura and the federal judiciary. So you got all three branches of government that are working in parallel or even conspiring against the American people. That's a combustible situation. It's what happened in the days leading up to the revolution. The court of St. King James took our legal system back to London, and when they robbed us of our rights, that's when we had no choice but to declare a new country and rise up against them forcefully. And I think that's going to happen here ultimately. We're trying to head that off, but I see a bloodbath in the future. I really do, because American people are getting wise to this kind of stuff, and I don't want to see that happen.
Definitely no. And you know, again, Laura, you are a somewhat polarizing figure. Some of the things that I find most impressive and most admirable about you are your tenacity, your drive, your willingness to go anywhere and ask anyone anything. And when you do those kinds of things, when you poke the dragon, as it were, I mean, there's tons of people who send me hateful messages. I've seen some of the hateful messages that people send you. They're truly awful. But the thing is, even if someone dislikes Laura or me, this is something that really needs to get your attention. Because as Laura said, if they can take her and take her cell phone from her and physically detain her or push her or grab her, or the police can do whatever they want to a young woman, what happens to everybody else? They can do anything they want at any time. It's truly a dangerous situation.
Yeah, no, exactly. And also, too, I mean, just thinking about thought crimes, right? It shouldn't be, you shouldn't be able to criminalize somebody in this country for seeking out the truth. My job as a journalist is to ask questions. It's to seek out the truth. And when you're dealing with a federal terrorism trial in which an act of jihad is the reason why 49 innocent people are dead, right? The reason why North Solomon is on trial, I believe I have a right as a journalist and a professional duty to ask her family how they feel about jihad, right? That is not an inappropriate question, which is what supposedly the court told the media when they asked them about why I was banned. Apparently, somebody said that my questioning was highly inappropriate, or the court deemed my behavior to be highly inappropriate.
But this is the perpetrator of the crime. It's not a victim or something. This is someone who is doing jihad in America against U.S. citizens, and they're sensitive to you asking her questions?
Yeah, well, that's the world we live in, okay? And there's this duality out there that somehow, and the left is using this, they're saying there's racism against Muslims, Council for American Islamic Relations, terrorist-related organization, helps fund terrorism. You know, they bring cases against people for libel all the time, but when you get into discovery and you want to look at their financial records, those cases get dismissed.
Wow.
This is a very evil group, and Laura's been following that group. I've sued that group in the past.
CARE, you're talking about, right?
CARE, yeah.
And they attacked me today. They had a representative for CARE, a guy who used to work for CARE Florida, attack me. He said, Laura Loomer is a fake journalist who purposefully got kicked out of the North Solomon trial to get attention today.
Oh.
I'll tell you, I didn't purposefully try to get kicked out or banned. I was sitting there quietly, peacefully on my laptop. I didn't do anything wrong.
I can't imagine that you would purposely ask a 200-pound police officer to manhandle you, take your electronics, look through your phone, your sensitive information, your private information. I mean, this is a gross invasion of your privacy. As you said, no warrant, no probable cause. These are all the same things that led to the 2 years of incarceration that the Bundys faced, that Pete Santilli faced. This is crazy.
Yeah, and obviously, you can hear from my voice, I don't feel well today.
You don't sound well. You've been through a very stressful situation.
I went to this trial today hoping that a verdict would be released and that I could have a peaceful day and sit there and write my stories in the press room alongside all the other reporters and do my job as a journalist. And then I had to, endure all of this abuse today, and just, I didn't ask for this. I wasn't asking for this today. I just wanted to have, kind of a low-key day at the courthouse.
Ironically, when I was assisting Klayman Bundy in the trial in Nevada, and that's when we met, you, Laura, me, that's how we became friends, is that I was also not just serving as a lawyer, I was serving as a journalist, because I write columns, I have a radio show on Saturday. I hope you guys can both come on tomorrow. Can you come on my radio show?
Is it on Friday or Saturday, Larry?
I'm taping it tomorrow.
Ah, okay. And yes, I'd be delighted to do that.
I'll come on.
Yeah, I'll send you the time, and people should listen to that at radioamerica.com and at freedomwatchusa.org. We have a blog up there. But I was literally shouted out of the press room one day. I was leaving my briefcase there because they wouldn't let you bring it upstairs if you had your cell phone and everything. And these really nasty journalists in Las Vegas, leftist journalists, were completely disrespectful. And, I didn't get what Laura got today, but they're vicious. They're vipers. And tell them how the leftist journalists laughed at you, Laura, today. I mean, they were mocking you.
They were mocking me, and they were like, afterwards, they all came up to me and they shut their cameras in my face and were asking me what happened. And I told them, and they're like, oh, well, you're not a journalist, Laura. You're a blogger. You're an activist. You're a blogger with a PayPal account. And they were just being so disrespectful to me. And they kept accusing me of things. Like, there were reporters who were accusing me of, they said, the reason you were banned is because you filmed on federal property. I said, no. If I was banned for filming on federal property or like recording on the grounds outside the courthouse, which is legal, by the way, you're allowed to record on the footsteps or the sidewalk of the courthouse, just like all the other reporters did. Right. Then they would have told me, excuse me, ma'am, you're not allowed to do this. We're going to have to ban you from the premise. But they didn't say that. Nobody came up to me and asked me anything about recording the day before. Right? I was able to get past security. What happened is when I was past security today and I walked up to the press room, when I was walking to the press room, there was a reporter in the hallway near the press room talking to, her name is Susan Clary. She's the spokeswoman for the Salman family, and she's the woman who was next to Noor's family when I was asking them the questions, right? And she does not like me.
I saw her on your video.
She saw me walk to the press room and gave me the dirtiest look ever. And it was 15 minutes later that a U.S. Marshal came and escorted me out. So I truly believe that this woman didn't like the fact that I was in the press room and that I was in the courthouse. And so she asked them to take me away. She probably made up some wild accusation.
Wow. We're hearing a lot about this kind of stuff. There's people being banned. Laura, you got a ban on Twitter, didn't you, for speaking your mind or something like that?
Well, I was suspended, but I used to be verified, as you know. I used to have a verified mark next to my name on Twitter, and they took it away from me after the terrorist attack in New York City, in which we were together that day, Jason. You and I actually that day, and you're familiar. And I called out Anderson Cooper, and I called out Bill de Blasio, and I called out people for basically not covering the fact that this guy was an Uber driver, right? And that Uber is endangering people by hiring Islamic immigrant drivers who are raping women, weaponizing vehicles to commit acts of jihad, and really just abusing their status in this country as Uber drivers to find and prey on what they would call infidels to kill, right? And because of that, I was unverified on Twitter, and people accused me of being an Islamophobe. They accused me of being a racist, even though Islam is not a race. They accused me of being a bigot, a white supremacist, even though I'm Jewish, right? So it's just very absurd.
Now, Laura, didn't you have a personal experience where you were persecuted by an Islamic Uber driver because you and a Jewish friend of yours were going to a Passover Seder or a Rosh Hashanah holiday, and you mentioned that in the car and the driver threw you out?
Yeah, a friend of mine, Dr. Jane Ruby, actually, we were in New York City together, and we were spending Rosh Hashanah together, and we had just finished shopping. And we got an Uber, and the guy who picked us up, his name was Muhammad, and he was dressed in full Islamic garb. And when he was driving us, he overheard us say, Jane asked me where I wanted to have dinner, Rosh Hashanah dinner. And I was like, I don't know, we'll figure something out. And when he heard us say Rosh Hashanah, he pulled over on the side of the road, and he ended the trip, and he made us get out of the car. And he would not continue the trip to our hotel, which was several blocks away. And it was only after he heard us mention Rosh Hashanah. And we filed a complaint with Uber, and they said they were doing an investigation, and nothing ever came of it.
No, they banned you, didn't they?
No,
they ended up banning me several months later after I called them out. And the funniest part about it is I actually decided to take advantage of Bill de Blasio. Bill de Blasio has like a discrimination like free legal counsel service in New York that you can use if you're a victim of discrimination. And I filed an official complaint, and the woman who was reviewing the complaint was a Muslim, all right? And so then when she took my interview, she compromised the interview and she totally made up lies and said that Jane and I provided different stories, even though we provided the same exact scenario as to what happened. And so they threw out my complaint against this Islamic, clearly radicalized driver who is refusing to give rides to Jewish women in Manhattan, 5 blocks away from the World Trade Center. All right. So this is a serious problem. And
you know,
nobody
it's interesting, Laura, because Chris Gowan, defense attorney for Imran Awan, an individual of low moral standing, in my personal opinion, who was in charge of retrieving Diet Coke for President Bill Clinton at the time that he worked for the Clinton Foundation, said to Judge Chutkan that Imran Awan, who has been accused of warehousing congressional data in an off-site illegal server after he hacked Blackberries and laptops, Chris Gowan told the judge that Imran needed to have his GPS house arrest device removed because he was driving for Uber. Interesting.
Yeah. Well, Uber has a lot of problems.
They've got a lot to answer for.
Good point. Let me tell you another problem. I've actually been thinking about bringing a class action against Uber.
I would love to.
Yeah, particularly not just with you. We'll put in a discrimination count. But what they do is they hire these drivers. They send them into neighborhoods that don't know these neighborhoods. They don't speak English. They get lost. You call them up and you say, hey, you need to come here. And then they cancel you out and Uber charges you $5.
Right.
Routine.
Exactly.
And to try to get Uber on the phone to correct it, you know, particularly if you're a lawyer that bills by the hour or whatever, welcome life, you're not going to do that. And it's a total scam. Uber has become totally incompetent. It's corrupt. And frankly, it needs to be sued more and more.
Now, if I'm not mistaken, there was a major investment in Uber by a Saudi Arabian interest. And I tend to think that Uber is utilizing a business plan whereby they create such competition for traditional car services and taxis, particularly in cities where that business might be difficult to run. And they basically run these other companies out of business because they have so much investment from these outside companies that they're not really worried about making money from the car trips. And then when all these other taxi companies are out of business and Uber has a monopoly in the way that YouTube does or Twitter does, once they've got you hooked on that service, they're going to be able to do things like banning you when you don't want to be thrown out of the car by a Muslim driver who doesn't like Rosh Hashanah. They're going to be able to exert undue power.
Well, driverless cars, they're using that. I mean, that's frightening. And, just the whole concept of Uber, it's a very good concept, but the way it's being implemented right now is a disaster. I don't take Uber hardly at all anymore unless I have to. In fact, even with the higher prices, I'll take a taxi these days.
Right.
As bad as it is.
And Laura, you were telling us that you had a temporary ban on Twitter. Even though you're still the same person, they've decided that you're no longer verified. I mean, this is clearly an effort for Twitter to, just as Larry described, where Uber is charging you $5. I mean, $5 in and of itself is not a tremendous deal, but it's the fact that they're doing it, and to them, they're doing it to hundreds of thousands or millions of people. It's this low-level disruption, and by removing your verification on Twitter, it doesn't stop you from being a journalist, but of course, it doesn't help you. And we heard very recently from Dr. Corsi, he was banned on YouTube. I've been banned from live streaming on YouTube. There are all these things going on to disrupt our First Amendment rights. And it brings me to a question that I've been wanting to ask, Larry. A lot of people join services like Twitter, like YouTube, and they do it anonymously. They'll create an account, whatever, the teddy bear, and that's their handle on YouTube or whatever. And then they'll go and file complaints. And I've been speaking out lately that I really object to these anonymous complaints that are being filed because I don't personally feel that it makes legal, logical sense for an anonymous entity on the internet to have an expectation of protection by the U.S. Constitution. As I understand it as a non-lawyer, the U.S. Constitution protects citizens of the United States, and if someone's an anonymous entity on the internet, well, they could be in China, they could be in Spain, Mexico, Canada, they could be in artificial intelligence. Are anonymous entities protected by the First Amendment of the Constitution?
Well, I think everybody's protected that's an American citizen by the Constitution. But they're not citizens, technically speaking, if they're anonymous. You don't know who they are. And, this presents a question as to how you mete out justice. But, yeah, the country's out of control. The Democrats and the left want to take control of this social media. They want to control it. They want to control the content. They intimidate these providers. These providers are leftist in and of themselves. Zuckerberg is, ultra-left.
Right.
And so are many of the others. Netflix just hired Susan Rice. I mean, this is unbelievable as a board director. We're fighting upstream. But fortunately, we have people like you. We have Laura as journalists. We have me as lawyers. And we will win in the end because we're right. And I do believe, if I might say so, all three of us are Jewish. So I think Yahweh's on our side. So we will prevail in the end.
And we do have to be clever, and we do have to take measures. So definitely people should go to freedomwatchusa.org, and they should consider donating to Freedom Watch so that Larry can continue to do the good work that he's doing, defending people like Laura who have been wronged. I'm being as proactive as I can be to sort of offset the measures that some people are taking to try to shut us down. The thing is, they don't even have legitimate grounds to do these things. I'm getting these anonymous complaints on YouTube, which I do believe the Constitution also allows me the right to confront my accusers. And if they're anonymous and I don't know what I'm being accused of, how can I do that? Towards the effort of protecting our viewers and our ability to get the word out, just today, this is actually the very first broadcast where we've been able to do this, I've added a new technology to our Patreon account, and we're using something called Crowdcast, which is a new service that I'm paying for, where people who are Patreon sponsors of Crowdsource the Truth will now have exclusive access to the same broadcasts that people can get for free on YouTube and Periscope and Facebook. But of course, while we're under this live streaming ban for the next 3 months, that I don't even have a legitimate course to appeal, people who want to be insulated from the anonymous losers who submit anonymous complaints and try to deny us our First Amendment rights to bring you stories about people like Larry, people like Laura, people like Dr. Corsi, you can become a sponsor on patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth, and from now on you'll be able to enjoy the live stream broadcasts irrespective of what's going on with the YouTube account. And I personally want to make a big issue out of YouTube changing their policies so that they are a more level playing field. Dr. Corsi has spoken a lot about his desire to implement an Internet Bill of Rights, and I think that's very important.
Right. I agree. I support that Internet Bill of Rights.
Absolutely. Now, Laura, you're losing your voice a little bit, and Larry, was there anything else that you guys wanted to share with us?
I want to end on this note, isn't it? Yes, Laura needs support. We're going to defend her. We'll discuss whether we bring cases against some of these characters. I think that may be warranted and likely is warranted. But we need to start at the top. People used to ask me, Larry, why do you sue the President of the United States? I said, well, if we can make an example of him, this was Bill Clinton at the time, then the rest of us maybe will fall in line. And we do need a special counsel, and I need to keep promoting that, because the Inspector General of the Justice Department is like the fox guarding its own hen house. It has no prosecutorial authority. It cannot go out and subpoena witnesses. It doesn't have the powers of a grand jury. And a special counsel, if I'm appointed, will have all the powers of the Justice Department, and I'll be able to call my own shots. And finally, we'll start to clean out the swamp. And President Trump, if you're listening, and we will send this to you, please put your lawyers in the back room and make the decisions yourself. Do not worry about impeachment. You'll never be convicted. Do what you need to do. Clean house now, because if you don't, they're going to drag you down with the rest of us, and we don't want to see that happen. So go to freedomwatchusa.org, sign the petition, donate to our causes, and let's have a citizens' army to rise up and take the country back and put it in the vision of our founding fathers.
And I just want to add something that, I'm really thankful for Larry Klayman, because when I called him today from the courthouse, he was the first person I thought about. I said, oh my God, I need a lawyer. And I thought, who has an expert in, the federal government abusing the rights of citizens and journalists? And Larry was the first person I thought about. And I thought about the great work he did for Klayman Bundy and his sons. And, I just wanted to say that I'm very thankful, because he stopped what he was doing today. When I called him, he took my call immediately and helped me as much as he could. So I'm very thankful.
I personally consider Larry a national treasure. I'm glad we have him. He's doing really important work. Larry, I do have one more question for you. We've been hearing so much about Inspector General Horowitz, who is supposed to release this report on the Department of Justice that purportedly was the impetus for the firing of Andrew McCabe, who is doing this investigation into Sessions. Personally, I think Andrew McCabe's investigations are a little sketchy, but do you know anything about Michael Horowitz, and what do you expect to hear from this Inspector General report?
Well, he is Obama appointee, so that tells you something right there. And whenever you hear these accolades about somebody in Washington, D.C. who's part of this establishment, look out. We heard that about Mueller. We heard that about Comey. They say that, he's a great man. He's independent. He's not independent. He works for the Justice Department. He works for Sessions. He's done nothing with regard to investigating the prosecutorial abuse with Klayman Bundy. And I had to sue to try to force that. It's still in progress. And frankly, I don't think that you'll see any justice. I know you won't see any justice out of the Inspector General of the Justice Department. And that's my alma mater. And that's why I take it so personally. I was a Justice Department prosecutor and defense lawyer. It's not going to happen.
Disappointed to hear that, but I'm afraid to say I don't doubt what you say at all. I want to thank both of you for joining me today. I want everyone to go to freedomwatchusa.org. Let's get a special counsel in there who has the courage and the know-how to get something done. We need to drain this swamp. Laura, Larry, thank you very much. I hope you both have a fantastic evening. Laura, get some rest. Tomorrow will be better. And I want you to know, Laura, I'm very proud of you. And when you get this kind of resistance, I've only been a journalist for 1 year, but I'll tell you this, when I went to Hollywood with a 3D camera that I invented, everybody laughed at me and said, you're an idiot. You don't know anything about 3D. But I've won awards, and I've invented technology that has become the industry standard for motion picture production and stereoscopic photography. And Laura, I know that you have a tremendous career ahead of you as a journalist, and you'll be laughing at those jerks pretty soon.
I'm proud of you guys too. So thank God there are people like both of you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Have a great night, you guys. Thanks everyone for watching. I'll see you tomorrow.
Thank you.